I think quite often when horses say I can't or I don't understand, we instantly go back to our limiting beliefs, which is I'm not good enough to handle this situation that is actually in front of me, which is completely obviously not true, because it's not about the obstacle, it's about what that moment triggers.
Happy Monday and super welcome to this week's podcast episode. How are you doing today, Lorna?
And good, thank you. How are you?
Good. I've heard we're going to have 28 degrees here by this weekend. So,
hallelujah.
Oh my God. I feel like we talk about the weather so often in this podcast.
We do. And actually, that's quite cool because it's not just a British thing to talk about the weather either. It's obviously a Swedish and a Belgian thing also.
Yeah, I believe it is. All right. Well, let's maybe dive in instead. Today, we're going to talk about anger management and judgment management. It comes from a question from one of our listeners, and she explained it as being I was out riding with my horse, and she was being really good, and then there was this bridge thing that I wanted to cross, and there was no way in hell my horse wanted to go over it, so I tried really hard, and then I stepped off my horse and I walked her over it a couple of times. She was all good, then I got back on again, and the horse still don't want to go over this bridge thing, and I lost it. Basically, I got angry and upset, and then afterwards she said, I really judge myself for doing that, because she's like, actually, it's I'm not proud of that I did that. And then there was a lot of judgment that follows. So she was basically like, there's two questions here in one that I'm hearing. It's well, first of all, how can I deal with that feeling of anger that arose at that moment, and not allowing that to take over my behavior and start being an ass to my horse, basically. And then the other part of the question is, okay, that judgment that follows after, how can I deal with that emotion? So it's basically, the way I read this question is like, how do I deal with those emotions that pop up and take over and start controlling what I'm doing?
Yeah. And I think, first of all, let's put it out there that nobody really wants to experience this, but it's something that we all experience. And I think not so many people, speak honestly about the fact that, it's not just a little bit of irritation, it's that full on anger. And yes, we all know it's a useless emotion, but I think speak to any horse person at some point in their life, and that can be, a nappy horse, it can be a horse that won't load. Think of the people that we talk to, the anger that is involved when your horse won't load, when it won't move forward, when it won't go out the yard, like whatever that is. And then we turn it into something that feels so personal, as in, why are you doing this to me? What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. This thing of like, why are you doing this, quote unquote, to me? Because if we look at where anger is coming from, it usually is created by a thought, something again, all emotions, all feelings are created by thoughts. But we've been through this in the past, but just in case someone is listening to this for one of the first episodes. All the emotions and feelings that we have, they come from a thought. And anger usually comes from a thought along the lines of like overestimating the malicious intent in which the other person, or in this case, the horse, is on purpose being an ass towards us. and I think that really resonates with me as well. Like, I have similar situations with my horses like this. Like you say, if they don't want to load, or especially with my huge chestnut mare, where she can, trot around and canter around in the arena as if nothing is all good, being a good girl. And then there's a robot lawnmower that is starting to cut along the side of the arena, and all of a sudden she cannot go on that side of the arena. Well, she's been trotting around there, cantering around that, even with the lawnmower being there so many times, and then all of a sudden she cannot literally go. And then indeed you're like, you're being like a total fucking drama queen, you're over-exaggerating. And then I get angry, and then she gets angry, and then it goes just downhill from there, like, let's be honest. And I think that feeling of anger, so I think that's the first thing. Like, it usually comes from overestimating the malicious intent behind this. Like, I really think like, okay, you're being an ass just because you're being an ass. Like, you cannot be afraid, you're just being an asshole towards me, like you're just playing around with me. Well, actually, I think that is all bullshit. Like, horses by nature, if we break this down, horses by nature are not being asses to us. Actually, for 99% of the time, they're doing everything they can to please us and help us and be good boys and good girls. Like, if there is something going on, there's a reason for it.
Yeah, and I think those feelings are about being challenged, about being exposed, about being ignored, about being embarrassed, about being made powerless. Anybody knows who's got, I keep going back to a horse that won't load, you're essentially powerless. Yes, there's so much you can do. You get your food and lift a foot up and get a lunge rope and do all those kind of things, but you are powerless in those situations. A napping horse, yes, there's so much you can do, but I think, and underneath that anger, there is always something that is much more vulnerable, and that can be fear, it can be shame, it can be helplessness, it can be loss of control, it can be fear of judgment. Like, it can be all of those things that are mixed into that one moment where, essentially, want of a better term, you lose your shit.
Yeah, I love what you say there about powerless. Is that something I heard a while back as well? Also, people that get, like, if you're having conversations with people, like the first person that get angry, that one loses. Like,
Yeah.
that's because
Yeah.
the point that we get angry, it's like when like you say, we're out of options. We realize we're not going to win this discussion, and we are powerless. Like, we feel like we're out of options.
Mm.
And I guess that happens. That happens with people, but it also happens with horses, obviously. I mean, they are by nature huge. Like, they weigh so much more than us. So if they
Yeah.
decide, like, okay, I'm not going to walk on that trailer, like, yeah, that's, unless you can outsmart them, you're not going to get them onto that trailer. Like, and that, I think that you say, like, that feeling of powerlessness,
Yeah.
it's like you're at wit's end. Like, it's
Mm.
frustration, it's anger. Like, you really, it's out of your control, out of your power.
And then I think that there's that emotional crash or sadness or tears or whatever that looks like, because it's a realization that you're not who you wanted to be in that moment. So then we become guilty, and then there's a bit of grief. There's everything all rolled into it, because most of us don't want our horses to obey us as such. Like, we want that connection and trust. And I do believe in those moments you're like, oh, the horse doesn't trust me, regardless of whichever obstacle is in your way. So I think that is where that big crash comes, because we take that horse's behavior personally. It's me. Like, so then your nervous system starts creating this crazy story in that moment.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, with that judgment of fault, I think it's also like, I should have known better. Like, if I look at me,
Yeah.
when my mare starts to act out in the arena, and then afterwards,
Yeah.
I'm always like, I know her better than that. Like, I know better. I know that, once she starts to get like that, and I get angry, then yeah, it only goes worse. Like, why? And then I'm like,
Yeah.
I should be a better rider. I should be able to deal with it. I should, and all those, like, I should have, I should have, I should have. And that is, like you
Yeah.
say, it's, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I
Go ahead.
think anger comes out in those moments, because it's almost like, ignoring you or whatever that looks like, you cannot tolerate that anymore. So, anybody knows with a napping horse, or one that won't go over a bit of water or whatever that looks like, you tolerate and you try for so long. And then if you're anything like me, you get to the end of your tether. And yes, you don't want to act in that situation, but you have to also remember we're busy people, busy lives. You're probably short of time, like whatever that looks like, and you've got your pressure to do that task in that amount of time, and your horse, for whatever reason in that day, doesn't feel comfortable doing whatever that task is. And then we add pressure, we start adding self-judgment, we become overwhelmed, we have a fear of failure, I suppose, stuck. So actually the bridge, the napping, the loading, whatever, it suddenly represents something about yourself in that moment.
Mhm.
So it's really nothing to do with that obstacle, really.
No, it just reminds me of, like,
Yeah.
so that I will be, it just triggers you. It just
Yeah,
triggers a belief
100%.
of yours.
Yeah.
Like, in my case, like I said, it's like, oh yeah, it just proves yet again that I'm a shitty rider, because, like, I should have known, like, it's someone else would have probably known how to ride out that, instead of making it worse.
Yeah. I think quite often when horses say, I can't, or I don't understand, we instantly go back to our limiting beliefs, which is, I'm not good enough to handle this situation that is actually in front of me, which is completely, obviously, not true, because it's not about the obstacle. It's about what that moment triggers within us inside. So that's quite a cool kind of awareness point, or a little journaling question, just to ask yourself if anybody else is going through this right now.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. And I think always, like, it's always, and that's why I always like to think also, it can be easy to be judgmental and be like, oh, this was a bad event. Like, it was
Yeah.
bad that I got
Yeah.
angry, and it was
Yeah.
bad that this happened, and you add all that judgment to it. But you can also look at it as being like, okay, that was actually quite useful, because that happened, I am now, like, now we are sitting here talking about this, first of all, so we're able to give someone some tools around this. And also, like, if this happens to you, it usually is the moments where you're forced to kind of stop for a minute and take a step back and start to reflect.
Mhm.
And actually, okay, that did not have the result that I wanted. What can I do different the next time? And those are learning moments. That
Yeah.
is learning. That is when learning happens. So it's easy to be like, oh yeah, that was a bad event and it was shit that happened. No, actually, if you can sit down and reflect and take something from that and learn from it and become another rider going forward that's going to act just slightly different,
Yeah.
then you actually grew from that. So in that sense, it wasn't a bad event. It was actually a useful event.
Yeah, and I think also checking a level deeper, it's easy to say that your horse is being disobedient, but actually it has a nervous system of its own as well. And, I always talk about red and blue brain, and red brain's only question is, am I safe? So that's your own nervous system. You have to also remember your horse has that brain as well, fight or flight animals, am I safe? And quite often I think we translate a horse's fear into they're being naughty, they're being bad. A horse is not bad on purpose. There is some sort of fear or, I guess, lack of trust within it. So we just have to watch that the horse, sometimes they do misunderstand, sometimes they feel pressured, sometimes they have emotions, they feel unsafe, which often then flips on us and we feel rejected or frustrated or disconnected. But you've got two nervous systems essentially working together here. So both of them suddenly feel alone. And actually we've lost that connection to what's happened in the moment. And we've just started judging the situation based on our own limiting beliefs.
I love what you said there about we both started feeling alone.
Yeah. It's easy to say, it's disobedient, it's not doing what I'm asking, but actually if we can connect to them on a much deeper level, the reason they don't do something is because they are afraid. So actually, how can we connect to that on a deeper level? Because it's easy to say they're being stupid, they're messing around, they're doing this, they're doing that, blah, blah, blah. But they don't really think like that. Like they either don't understand us or they are afraid somewhere. So then that is therefore our job. I think we have to reconnect with ourselves first, because if our mind's gone off somewhere else and we're in full panic mode or anger or whatever that looks like, there's no way we're going to be able to connect to them. So you have to be able to connect to yourself first and then be able to reconnect to them and say, I would always say, okay, what does this horse need from me in this moment? And the answer, I promise you, is never anger. Like, yes, sometimes we think it is, but on reflection, nobody would ever say, yeah, my horse, well, I would doubt anybody would ever say my horse needed me to be angry in that moment. So actually, I think it's all about coming, like we always say, come back to the present moment, be able to reconnect to yourself. And, we can go on from that. And it's always about your breath, your awareness, all that kind of stuff. So we get out of survival mode and we start getting into action mode, essentially.
Yeah, and I also think it's about what you said there, like because immediately when you said my horse doesn't need anger from me, I 100%, yeah, you're absolutely right. But they can need other things. Like I think a lot of times they need clarity. Like,
Yeah,
because
100%.
it's easy to think then, okay, I should just be nice to my horse and pat them on their neck and be like, okay, don't be afraid, it's okay, you don't have to walk out. Like that is not a solution either. As you also know, it's like it's about, but I think there's a difference between, like you can be clear without getting angry.
Yeah.
And that is, it's easier said than done, right? Because you feel like, well, I've kicked my inside leg into her like 5 times now and she hasn't listened. So that's when you get angry. But then maybe you just would have needed to do that a 6th time and without adding the anger or the judgment to that, but actually just, again, repetition, because a horse is, you just have to explain it or explain it in a different way. Like, how can you, like, if you were to sit with a child that's trying to learn mathematics, like in school, algebra, like if you get angry at them, that's not going to help. And I guess that's what it's like with the horses as well. It's like you say, either they're afraid or they haven't understood. And I guess when they're afraid, they're like, speaking of their nervous system, when they get afraid, they are not going to be busy with your inside leg anymore, because when they, step into that fear response, they're pure instinct. Like, and then the first focus of their whole brain body is going to be, let's get away from this freaking thing. Like, they're not going to be responsive to what you're trying to tell them anymore. Their instincts are going to take over. And then a horse's instinct is always to get away from it. So I think it's also, I suppose I don't have the answer, but I think about something that my dressage trainer once told me. Like, one of my horses was afraid in the corner. He's like, yeah, that is not the place to solve it, because like you have to get the horse to respond to your inside leg on the other side of the circle, because when you pass that corner, there's no way, because then they're just flight.
And I think as well, if you think about that whole mind-body connection thing, exactly what you're saying, you can say it's okay and you can pat them down the neck, but a horse is not. If you think about the reaction that a fly has when it lands on the horse's body, how it can have such a massive reaction, like it's not listening to you patting it saying it's okay. It's listening to your own nervous system that says, I'm afraid to get over the bridge, or, you're napping. I'm patting you saying it's okay, but my whole system is saying, holy shit, we're we're in danger here. Or your mind says, I've got a work call in half an hour and I don't really have time for that. Your horse is not listening to it's okay. It's listening to your mind being busy. If you feel frustrated, it's listening to your emotions. So it's not listening to anything that's coming out of your mouth. It is listening to every single thing that is actually happening in your body in that moment. Hence the
So
reason.
basically, like, how can you then? Because I'm guessing what you're saying then. So the thing that you want to change
Yeah.
is actually what the energy
Yourself.
that you're radiating. Yeah.
Yourself. Yeah. But I think it's no different to, when we talk about all these tracks and people are afraid of boxers and whatever that looks like, first of all, you have to have your breath. Like, you have to have that softness, because if you listen to I think it was last week's on Kerry or the one before that, when you hard staring at something, when you're trying to find that distance. So when you're so determined that you're getting over that freaking bridge, but you've stopped breathing, like it's all high in your body has become really tense. For me, it's the same thing. We have to take that deep breath, regulate your own nervous system, say, okay, it's okay, we're safe here, so I am safe. Then let's access what's the plan, not I'm in danger because my identity's at risk, or like whatever that looks like. Then let's, the same as the distance, let's look to the end of the arena. Let's take in what we can see. Let's make this a really relaxed situation so that A, I trust myself, and B, the horse actually starts to trust me. And then, like we always say, it's teeny tiny gains. One step forward, drop your rein, pat your horse, like whatever that looks like. Yes, you can't just be a fairy, for want of a better word, but you have to regulate your own nervous system first before we even start thinking about being able to connect to that horse. Because I honestly believe if the reaction to a fly, like imagine the reaction to just your heartbeat, the fact you're not breathing. It already is scared of something. Add in the fact that actually, and that's just not afraid in terms of I might hurt myself, but judgment, anxiety, worry, nerves, sadness, crying, like whatever that looks like, we've got all that added in the mix as well. So that's actually, it's just adding an enormous amount of pressure into the situation as well. Yeah. And sometimes I think anger feels a bit more power than being a little bit vulnerable about it and saying, okay, I'm going to take a breath here. I'm going to regulate myself and just going to check in that actually we're on the same page here and, get that connection with your horse. Whereas sometimes that power and that, I've got to get it done, actually you think is more powerful in the moment.
Yeah. Awesome. So I dare to say there were a lot of ideas in here. Again, I think we went right, left, right, left, center, top, bottom. But there was a lot of ideas in here. There's a lot of things that you could start with. And as always, if you have any further question based on what the things that we talked about, do reach out.
Yeah.
Do reach out.
I think one of the most important things to say is that you have to be able to regulate yourself before you start controlling your horse. Because if you cannot regulate yourself, how can you expect to be able to regulate your horse? And that's obviously a lot of the work that we do in our coaching, is that open focus work, which is incredibly powerful. Doesn't matter whether you've got a horse that won't load, it stops at fences. It's, whatever you're afraid of, the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. So yeah, it's about changing your awareness, I think, and regulating your own nervous system.
Yeah. And if you're more interested in what Lorna is talking about, the work that we do one-on-one with our coaching clients, then do check out the show notes. That's mindig.eu/coaching. But do click the link straight in the show notes to make your life so much easier. And actually, before I forget as well, if you're listening to this podcast for the first time, then don't forget to press the follow button so you don't miss out on our future episodes. That way you get notified each Monday when we have new episodes coming out, so you don't forget. Right, Lorna. Anything else?
No, I think we've covered quite enough.
Covered all bases. Good. In that case, we're just going to finish this off with challenging you to start making strides in your mindset so you can truly make strides in your riding. And we will see you on the next magical Monday.